my name is Bailey Quam, and I am the owner of Art Teacher Diaries, and I'm here to show you how to make a rainbow color wheel mandala. And this was made using the mandala color wheel template that I've created, and it makes it pretty easy for students to create their own mandala design. Each one is unique. And for this project, the way I'm showing it to you, we're going to be using acrylic paint, but you can also use colored pencils or watercolors, pretty much any other medium where you can use color you could potentially do with this project. You'll notice that there are all 12 colors of the color wheel here. We have the hues, we have the tints and the shades, and I'll be talking more about that later on. And you can also glue these onto mat board or tag board, or just leave them like this cut out of the template. It's up to you depending on what supplies you have or your budget. So let's go ahead and get started. Mandalas are very intricate, beautiful designs often found in Hindu and Buddhist religions. Buddhist monks create mandalas representing different ideals and often represent the universe. Mandalas come in all shapes and sizes, different colors, black and white, and they often have something called radial symmetry that we'll talk about later on. Mandalas are often very relaxing and calming to create. And the color wheel that we're going to be creating is an example of a mandala, and the color wheel has 12 colors from red to red purple or red violet. To create your own mandala color wheel, you'll need the color wheel template that I've created. It has a blank color wheel, directions, a spot for your name, and a little wedge that is used to draw a design on, and then we'll be tracing that onto our blank color wheel. You'll also need a small paintbrush. Small paintbrushes are really useful for this project. A cup of water. You'll need a palette. Don't pay attention to how dirty mine is. Scissors, pencil, some paint, and your paper towel. I have the primary colors, blue, red, yellow, black, and white. Those are the only colors you'll need to create this mandala color wheel. Now I'm going to focus on the wedge shape first. I'm not really worried about painting just yet. So I need my pencil, and I'm going to draw a design within the wedge shape. And you can see in the directions it tells you to create a design. I like to create a design with about 7 sections in it, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm just drawing a shape. It could be any shape, any design you want. Right now I have 4 sections, so I need a few more things happening within this wedge to make it more interesting and to make the mandala look more intricate. The more lines and shapes and patterns you have inside, the more intricate it's going to look. It just might take a little longer to complete it with painting very, very carefully. So I did a circle in the middle there. I have almost enough. I need about 1 more section. And I do another triangle shape there. And this is totally random. You don't have to plan it out. You can if you want to, but I just kind of went with my gut. Now I'm using the scissors to cut along the dashed lines, and cut carefully. You don't want to rush this and then cut off half of your design. So I'm cutting out the wedge. Kind of looks like a piece of pie. And then I'm going to take a Sharpie and just go over my lines. And that just helps with tracing if you are using the tracing method. I'll show you another method shortly. You technically don't have to use Sharpie, but I just find it helpful. Any kind of dark marker will work too. It doesn't have to be a Sharpie. Now you can take your wedge and place it underneath the blank color wheel, and you can use a light box or a bright sunny window would work as well. I'm here in my studio at home, so your window might look slightly different, or if it's a really dark day or morning, it might not be bright enough to trace. So a light box will work as well. And I'm taking my pencil and I'm just very carefully going over my lines with my pencil. So if I make a mistake, I can erase my pencil lines. You want to try to keep your pencil lines not too dark, otherwise your paint might not cover your lines. For the purposes of this video, I'm making mine pretty dark, just so you can see them a little better on the camera. Now the other method for transferring your design to each wedge of the blank color wheel is to take your pie slice or your wedge and use a dark leaded pencil like an ebony pencil, 6B, 4B, 5B, any of those would probably work okay, and shade in the entire back side of that wedge. And you're essentially kind of making a transfer paper by shading in the back. And by flipping it over and placing it in the section, you're going to then trace over your lines, pressing relatively firmly. If you press too lightly, it won't transfer the image. And this is a little more useful if you don't have a light box or a bright window. So you can do either way. Either way will work just fine. You can see it transferred my design because I just need that for painting in. It doesn't have to stay there forever. Tracing over again. And you can do this a couple times before having to go back and add more lead to the back of the wedge. So if it looks like it's not transferring very well anymore, you might have to go back and recolor the back side of the wedge in with your dark leaded pencil. Now, I've mentioned radial symmetry a couple times now. There are three types of symmetry: asymmetry, radial symmetry, and bilateral or symmetrical symmetry. And radial symmetry means that you could take several lines across the design and divide it, and on either side it would be equal. So we are creating a radial symmetrical design. Usually radial symmetry has to do with circles. So I'm following the directions here again, and I have my design all drawn out and I am ready to start painting. We're going to talk a little bit about a few things here. So we have three vocab words. We have hue, shade, and tint. And I'm going to show you an example of each one here. First, we're going to talk about hue, and hue is just pure color. So the color straight out of the paint tube, or when you are mixing two primary colors or secondary colors together, you're going to use or going to get a hue, the pure color. So in this case, it's just blue. Now the next one I'm going to show you is going to be the tint, which is the color plus white. So in this case, I'm going to take blue, add some white to it. It's going to make a light blue, and light blue is actually a tint. So I'm adding some white to my blue. I'm going to make a nice sky blue color and paint that in, and that is my tint. And again, this is just for example only. You do not have to do this. I just wanted to illustrate my point here. By mixing tints, shades, and then adding the hues in there, it's going to add a little more variety to your mandala, make it a little more interesting, hopefully. And it's really good practice for later paintings when you're trying to make a certain color, like a light blue or a dark navy blue or a maroon. When you're trying to get those tricky colors, this is really good practice for that, and it's going to help you remember how to make these colors. So the last one is going to be shade, which is the color plus black. And I'm taking my blue, adding some black to it, and this is going to make a navy blue. And sometimes the camera, it struggles to pick up the color, so it might look kind of black to you, but it should look like the color. Sometimes we run into problems where if you add too much black to the color, you can't see the color anymore, and that's not really a shade anymore. Then it's just the color black is overpowering your hue. But in this case, I have a nice navy blue. It's my blue plus black, and that is my shade. So hue, tint, shade. You'll need to remember those three vocab words. You'll have to know those in order to be successful at this project. And there's a little cheat sheet underneath the directions there for you. So I like to start with the color red first, And just because that's kind of your first color when you're making a rainbow, and it's a little bit easier for me to know which color to make next by starting with red. So I recommend you start there. You don't necessarily have to, but it's not a bad idea. You can start painting in any section of your color wheel, so it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm gonna make sure that my paintbrush isn't too wet because it was sitting in the water there. And I'm going to start by painting in the hue first, and you can choose any section. I just kind of chose the largest section for the hue, and I'm very, very carefully painting in the red into this area. This is the part where it can be a little tricky, especially if you're not used to painting. This is good practice. It's good fine motor practice for staying in the lines and being very careful, and you kind of get in the zone here, or hopefully you relax a little bit. The beauty of acrylic paint is that if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. You can just let it dry and just paint right over it. So it dries fairly quickly. You don't have to wait forever for it to dry. Usually in my experience, I've seen it dry in about 30 minutes to an hour. So if you make a mistake the day before, you can come back the next day and paint over it and fix it. So I'm carefully painting in this area with just my hue, just the red. I'm not mixing anything here. Since this is a primary color, I didn't have to make it. I just took it right out of the bottle and started using it. You might want to use the extra small brush for very fine details depending on your design. So I'm mainly using a small brush here. I used a larger brush there for the larger areas, but for the most part you will use a small brush just to make it a little easier for yourself with painting in small spaces. You can have your brush strokes showing if you want, or if you are really meticulous and maybe a perfectionist, you can go back over your brush strokes a second time to cover those up, depending on the paint that you're using. Sometimes your brush strokes will show more than others, and for some students that really drives them crazy. So if that's the case, just paint a second coat on top of your first coat. So now I'm doing the shades, and this is again kind of the tricky part. I think making a shade is probably the most difficult part of this process, and that's adding black to the color that you're using, so in this case red. And the tricky part is not adding too much black, because if you add too much black, black will just completely wipe out all of the color, and you won't be able to tell it's even a color. It'll just look like the color black. So I know it's kind of hard to see in the video, but it's a very, very dark red, really, really dark, almost like a really deep maroon color. And now I'm going to add a little more red here, and I'm painting in the next section, so it's a little bit lighter than the last one. And that's how you're going to see your design. And again, you can choose where you want your tints and shades. For this lesson here, I'm doing 3 shades, so 3 different shades of my red, and then 3 different tints of my red, and then of course the pure red hue that you can see that I started with. And when we zoom in here, you'll be able to tell a little better where the colors are different. So they're not the same. Each section is a different color. It doesn't look the same as the section that I just painted in. So you can see this one that I'm painting in is a little bit lighter than the last one. So my shades are done. Now I'm going to move on to the tints. So that is using the white. So I'll take my red and I'm going to add some white to that red. So I'm going to do more of like a bubblegum pink color. So I'm not adding too much white right away. And I'm going to paint that in the circle in the middle there. And you'll be able to really see the contrast between that circle with the bubblegum pink color and the red. You just have to remember, if you want your mandala to be symmetrical, you'll need to remember where you're painting in each area. So at the top there, I have 2 shades. On the side, I have one of the shades. The circle is going to be a tint. So for every section, that circle is going to be a tint of that color. Now I'm adding just a little more white to that color I already mixed. And then painting in the two small triangles at the bottom. I'm going to do the little triangle first, and then I'll do the last one towards the tip of the wedge. This is the kind of project that you really benefit from if you don't talk all that much. And I know that's really hard if you are sitting with your friends and you want to talk. But by not talking, you're allowing your brain full concentration on this project. So it's going to look neater. It's going to look a lot nicer. And you'll also find that you'll be hopefully more relaxed. And creating mandalas, it's really good for anxiety. It's good for, if you're nervous about something or if you have social anxiety. So this is a good way to just zone in or zone out, depending on how you see it, and just create. And you're just, worried about painting in the lines, mixing your colors, and just doing one little bit at a time. This is not something that should be done in a day. This should take at least a few days, if not a week or more. There you can see all of my tints and shades. So I have 7 different colors basically. I have my hue, and then I have the 3 shades and the 3 tints. Next, I'm going to move on to my red orange. So for the sake of time, I sped up the video here. I'm making my red orange. It's kind of this fiery red orange color. And so I used red with a little bit of yellow, and I'm painting in the hue in the same spot that I did the red. And then I'm going to mix my shades. So the color, the hue plus black. And each section again is a different color, so I'm not doing the same color in each section. I'm switching it up so it stands out. I have my tint in the circle, or one of my tints in the circle, and then my last 2 tints at the end there. I've kind of skipped ahead here just for the sake of time and your sanity. And you can see I've done most of the warm colors here. About half of it is done here. You can see each hue, each shade, and each tint. And it really makes the design come alive when you add the color to it like this. Now you're going to want to take a scissors once it's all completed and dry and cut out your mandala. And you need to be very careful, go nice and slow. Don't talk with your partner. Just go nice and easy and cut very carefully around the outside edge of your mandala color wheel. And at this point, you can decide, or if the teacher instructs you to glue it to matte board, black tag board, white tag board would work, construction paper, or if you just need to leave it like that, that's fine too. It's still not a bad idea to write your name on the back though, just in case someone has a similar design to you, so they can't take your design. And there is your beautiful mandala color wheel, and I hope you enjoyed this painting project and look forward to more painting.